This recording, meeting chat. Yeah, no, it's got a little red button there. There we go, we're recording.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to head out. I'll see you in half an hour.
Pardon me?
I'll see you in half an hour.
It saves into the office.
Oh, right into your
Yeah.
camera? Into the cloud?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and then you go and get it, and then I can actually have it, add the captioning and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I was just worried that it was being saved locally, and I was going to say, we'll have to make sure we find that file.
We'll check.
To give you.
We'll check, because usually I bring it in, but I forget how I did it. I've only had done it a couple times.
It would make sense if we go to your cloud.
We'll check and
cloud
see.
account.
Because I use Zoom, not Zoom, there's some whatever program they have in there to actually grab it.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know, I can't remember, I've only done it twice.
We can look at it.
Yeah, but thank you for remembering that, I will check at the end.
I just take to record the whole thing and then I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Well, Skype used to save it locally. I'm not sure what Teams does.
Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn off the mics here, I'm gonna put it on mute on my board.
Yeah.
So that anybody else says anything here, it's not going around forever and ever and ever.
Okay.
So I can mute it right now, so that.
What thing are you muting, actually?
I'm muting all the way.
Yeah, all the way.
So what about if
just
somebody wants to ask a
Just
question?
temporary.
Oh, temporarily
Just
now?
until it's ready to start. So
Okay.
Just so we're not accidentally.
Well, okay, yeah, I've got this thingy. Yeah. No. I promise not to walk into the room with it. Denise, so you've joined. Did you want to check your audio, Denise?
Yes, that would be great. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay. So question for you. When you guys present, is one person going to present the PowerPoint and then the rest of you, they'll move it along for all of you? Or are you each going to want to share the PowerPoint separately so that you can control it from your own computers?
It's probably what would be easiest, like, and because with only 10 minutes, I would want to make sure that we don't cause any unnecessary delays.
It's probably better if only one person shares it, because then you don't have to worry about the upload time and then getting to the right spot in the thing. You'll just have to tell whoever's moving it along to go to the next slide.
Next slide. Great.
So whoever, yeah. Lindsay just checked it and she was able to load it, no problem, and it worked fine.
Perfect. So perhaps if she's loaded it, should she be the one to move it along?
Yeah, you might want to ask her to be the one to move it around.
Move it along. Great. I will contact her now and tell her the plan.
Okay, sounds good.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I need food. Well, I was going to grab something from the little just quick muffin-y type thing. I don't know if anybody else is going to try to come in. So can you do me? So this is the mic, it's on. So if anybody comes on and is going, hello, hello, can you talk into it to check to see if their audio is okay?
I'll try not to eat
I'll
you.
be right
I'm gonna
back.
sit in your chair and
Yep.
just kind of
Yeah, and
straddle the
I'll be right
world.
back.
Sure, there's little stuff at the cafe.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna do.
Yeah. The whole college is. They just put people on all of them. I don't think it's fair. Yeah, and it's not right. It's not. It's like, you know, all the care about it is in their own mark. And that's it. But everything puts everybody off, and then you just be taking like, yeah, BS people, one BS people, one BS people, and do whatever I tell you to do. Oh my God, that jam is good. I was gonna say the cranberry strawberry. It's strawberry. But it almost don't sugar. Yes. Don't talk to me. No. Don't talk to me. Yeah. I'm stuck in between the two stages. The time that I come to really kind of yeah. And I'm like, yes, yeah. And I'm like, really no, but you know. Yeah, yeah. Is there a little bit of conflict? But I arm myself to the point where I got 590. If I have that. Have your own politics or someone else? It would be common. Oh, everyone probably can hear me, can you?
Yes. Hi, Cynthia.
It's Patricia.
This is Jeannie.
Hi, Jeannie. Can you hear me talking?
I can.
Oh, so I will stop talking.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I just logged in. I was wondering, can I upload my slides now so I don't have to do it while I'm speaking?
I assume, but Cynthia's not in the room.
Oh, okay.
She just went to the washroom and she'll be back shortly. She's just, yeah, she'll be back shortly.
Okay.
Okay. We're not
So-
ready to go yet anyway.
What's that? Sorry.
We're not ready to go yet anyway.
Yeah, I know. The reason I was testing the link. I was just curious because I have a short presentation. If I could upload the slides now in advance, then I don't have to do it in the middle of when I'm supposed to be speaking.
Right. And I'm not sure because I'm not techie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. So, okay, so I'll wait for Cynthia. Maybe if you wouldn't mind just asking her if she can send me a quick email to let me know if I can just upload my slides now.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Oh, okay.
And Leslie upload her slides now. Leslie, right? Yeah, Leslie. You're not the Leslie voice. No, Jeannie? Jeannie, sorry. Jeannie.
Hi.
Not yet because you're not up on the roster right now. Jackie got
Okay.
only one person can share at a time.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if like you could load all of the presentations before the event started, or you have
You used to do that in Skype, but then the person couldn't control them. But that's when you were able to give presenter rights.
Okay.
But it works differently in Teams because anybody can share at any point,
Okay.
but only one person can share at a time.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so I'll wait
Yeah.
until I'm up and then I just
Yeah.
browse for my PowerPoint and I should be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I might
Yeah, because it's different in Skype. I used to have to give people presenter rights in order for them to share. With Teams, anybody can share at any time.
Okay.
But
Okay.
but it doesn't
that's
save them into Teams.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Okay. Okay, no worries. I'll talk to you then.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, bye Cynthia.
Hello. I'm Cynthia, if you hadn't guessed. Sorry, I'm slow, but I'm getting there. Robin. Oh, hey, Robin. I don't think I've actually met. I did meet you in person, though, at the MHLA meeting, did I?
You were in person or remote?
In person,
Yeah.
in Moncton.
Yeah.
Oh, but you were online in Halifax.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't meet you in person. Nice to meet you. So I have your slides on the desktop. So when it comes time to read it, then I'll just share it. We have a lapel mic for you to use. That is the audience mic. They can use that too to ask questions so that everybody can hear online. Hey, Mike. No, let's see what else. So I might as well, you're both presenting in here. So we have a thing moving PowerPoint along.
Okay.
I'll tell you why.
Do they have the camera, or is there a camera that goes to that spot?
It goes right here. Yeah, podium as well. You can see it on the screen. You still want to see it down in the corner?
Yeah.
Here, I'll put it right on the podium and that spot.
Good, haven't seen you in ages.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
There's agendas on the table and evaluation forms.
I'm gonna evaluate myself, come on.
Yeah. Oh, you know how it is. No, you're evaluating
I did a crappy job, you know, like that.
The evaluating meeting, we're actually finally through like the evaluation forms. Feedback. The blue cards on the table are for the nutrition break. You can either use them now or go break.
Okay.
You can use them at that little cafe you saw coming in or downstairs with the big cafeteria.
You use the watch from up on the road, so
Right down where those ladies are?
Yep.
On the right. So, yeah, I know. I'm glad I told you this day. So, when you have your, whenever you have your thing up, we'll have this on. Okay. And you can use the arrows before that. I'll show you the thing up. And the lapel mic is right here. Jacquie Gahagan is speaking first, then Mike, and you, and then we have the three panelists.
Yeah,
And then-
I'm later on.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. I think we've got everything figured out. So. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to try this. Oops, somebody just try to. Yeah, seems to be.
Okay, so the guy said, the gentleman said they were just gonna go get some lunch and come back up.
Yep, works for me.
Okay, And that is like some of the best jam.
I know, I haven't tried it yet, but
Oh,
it
you
looked
gotta
really good.
try it.
Okay, I need to remember that this is on silent, and I'm gonna need to keep checking it because people keep asking me
Right.
for the login information.
Oh,
Because
you
I-
have it?
Well, I have it, but I sent it out to everybody by email this morning, but it was
Right.
in everybody's calendars. If they accepted the meeting, it should have gone into their calendar. with the
Right.
Join information. So I'm never quite sure
Yes, they do. or
how,
not.
how,
Yeah.
well, it depends on your program as well.
Yes. I'm glad they set Wi-Fi password stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's only one. We didn't have to, like at Dow,
No,
you have to
just
do one
one.
for everybody.
Yeah.
Each person gets their own at Dow,
That's right.
the way their policy works.
Hi.
Oops.
I'm Tricia. How
Mike Moosberger, Dalhousie.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Oh my God, this is good.
We have a cafe with coming in,
Okay.
as well as there's a monthly lunch. So this is for.
Hi, Cynthia.
Okay.
Hi, Holt. Tricia. Nice to meet you.
Just sec, I just realized I have jam.
Okay. Are you from
Ace?
Okay. I haven't met you yet, but I haven't been to a meeting lately.
I think we may have met last winter, but that was probably a while ago. So that's
Yeah.
It's local.
It's been a blur.
Yes.
Use that for
Okay.
coffee and there's something that. Hey, Andrea. Evaluation.
Okay.
I told,
That's okay.
I told him this morning, I didn't even recognize it.
Well, I explained this morning that the reports before.
Oh, okay.
That he was, well, they were supposed to take it. No, I didn't take it. And
Okay.
then I told them that you would be writing on the back.
Yeah.
So I didn't see what
Don't worry about it.
I think my
At a certain time, he's gone anyway. He's gone before.
Oh.
Oh, here you go, Emily.
Oh, thank you.
Agenda and an evaluation form. I just got jam on me. The jam is super good. Okay, I will attest that those buns are good. And the jam is super good.
And then, so I'll be, anywhere except for my office.
So I know where bathrooms are.
Well, that'll be exciting.
I can explain that. Where the market is, where the cafeteria is. I'm just trying to remember all the logistic things I have to share.
You have Wi-Fi access?
Yes. CAUL is the, so it's the HC guest network. CAUL is the username. And the password is 5656, food with a capital F.
Oh, no.
No caps. Doesn't really matter, usernames. Yeah, 5656, food with a capital F. All one, no spaces.
Is all caps?
No, lowercase.
Yeah, come again.
Yeah.
Okay, so the username is CAUL. And, but like you go to the guest.
Yeah, HC guest network.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm good. I'll see you later. learn.
Yeah, no, what? Yeah, I think last time. He was angling.
No, we talked, he emailed me about it. It's not gonna work out without a portrait, yeah.
He's doing well, so that's good.
That's good.
It sounds like it's working.
Now that I'm back from holidays, I'll give you,
I don't know.
send him an email, and we can get together on Skype.
Yeah.
So everybody, I don't have a chalkboard to write down the, there's no place to write the username and password. So I'll just have to tell everybody as they come in. Everybody has a power bar in front of their table or under their table, so you should be able to charge. Oh, right at the beginning of term too. Trial by fire.
Very active, yeah. Yeah, well, I didn't come right at the beginning of term because I thought.
Hi. Hi, Pam. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Pam? You're muted in case you're trying to talk to me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear
Okay.
us?
I can hear you very clearly. I can't hear anyone else.
That's okay. You're not supposed to hear anybody else, hopefully.
Okay.
Well, except if they're online, but there's only
Right.
like Allison online and she's been muted since she got on. So
Okay.
I'm not quite sure.
I'm
But yeah.
going, I wasn't, I didn't know if I'd be able to attend this afternoon. I'll be in and out, but I
Okay.
wanted to catch as much as I could. So,
That works for us.
okay.
Okay, somebody's greetings from UNB, from NB. Let me just see who has joined us. Pam, Allison. Who would be the greetings from NB? Is that you, Allison? The greetings from NB? There. Sue and Brett are waiting for a cab, so they should be here soon.
I was in Toronto and I put my iPad in to have the screen fixed because it's kind of done from Tuesday there. And I said, how many, so I don't break it again, you have any cases? It's like, that's good. So I'm like, okay, I'll do what I love it.
Bad girl.
And you can spell words that aren't really words.
Okay, Catherine. Catherine, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Excellent. Just wanted to make sure our audio was good. We can hear you fine too in the room.
Wonderful.
So we're just waiting for everybody else to join us. Oh, Jeannie. For some reason, Jeannie, you're not showing up on the screen, and I don't know why. You're sort of under the radar. Interesting. It doesn't show, it says you're here in the chat, but it doesn't show you actually on the screen, which is interesting. I've never had that happen before. Okay. Just want to look at the participant list. Yeah, you're not even listed on the participant list. Interesting. You are definitely under the radar. Welcome, Amy. Can you hear us? I can see you in the chat. Can you hear us, Amy? Okay, I'll check in a different way. So Amy, you are muted probably by default. So if you want to unmute yourself. And Jeannie, did you want to try your audio just to make sure we can hear you, because you're not showing up in the participant list, so I'm not quite sure if you're all fully into the meeting. Oh, you can't. You might have to go out and come back in again to the meeting and see if it works. I want to make sure it works for you. So you might have to quit Teams and then come back in, because it looks like you're halfway into the meeting. Hi. Oh, well, so far we're just trying to get everybody into the meeting. Okay. Some people seem to have their audio working and some don't.
It's lunch, we're hooked at the clock.
That's okay. We're just a little delayed. I've been checking folks. Somebody was half in the meeting. They were in the chat, but they weren't showing up as a participant, and they couldn't hear or speak. That happens every once. Okay, so you can hear us, Amy, right? Oh, that's good. Okay, just making sure on you. And Donna, you've joined us. Can you hear us, Donna? You may be muted, Donna, so we're not hearing you at the moment.
Sorry, Cynthia, I had just stepped out of the room for a minute. All's good here.
Okay, no problem. I just want to check because there was a couple of folks who weren't able to hear us. So I'm just checking everybody's audio. So Amy, did you want to test your audio? Because we can't hear you, but you say you can hear us.
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you now. So interesting. So Aggie, you've joined us, but I'm not sure if you can hear us or if we can hear you. If you want to test your audio, you may have to unmute. Same thing for you, Elizabeth, if you want to test yours. Oh, you can hear us, Aggie? Okay. Did you want to speak or to see if your audio works? Or if not, you can always ask questions through the chat. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. Elizabeth, if you want to check. Oh, you can hear us? Okay. Works for us. So I'm just We're getting ready. I'm just waiting for our first speaker to come in. She's in Montreal, so so there was a little bit of a time mix-up, but she should be here any minute. Okay.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Oh, who is that?
This is Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Awesome. And I don't know who this is.
Hi, Cynthia. Suzanne here.
Oh, hi, Suzanne. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yep. I'm going to try and mute
Perfect.
myself.
Oh. Oh, Mart, here's your agenda. Oh, Mart has a French agenda. Oh, Wi-Fi is your user. It's okay. So it's HC College, HC Guest, and then your username is CAUL, all lowercase CAUL, and then the password is 5656 food with a capital F. Okay, Jean Kelly. Jean, can you hear us? Denise, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and we can hear you well. I'm just checking Jean Kelly. If you wanted to check, you may have to unmute yourself. But I'm just checking to make sure you can hear us. Emma, welcome. If you want to unmute, you can check to see if we can hear you. And you can, oh, you can hear us, Emma?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. We can hear you.
Perfect. I'll just stay muted.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I was just making sure everybody can test their audio at the beginning when they come in. I do not know who MP is. But if you want to test your audio, go ahead. Emma, we haven't heard from you. Can you hear us? Okay. Hey, Mark. Any pick? Yeah, anyone in Okay. Interesting. So I'm just checking to make sure everybody, MP, who is MP? So whoever's MP, you may only
Unknown
be partial.
participant is now joining.
Okay. Welcome, unknown participant. If you want to check your audio, you can do so. You may have to unmute. So whoever is MP, we're not hearing you and you're not hearing us, it sounds like. You may have to...
that might be me. Cynthia, can you hear me now?
Yeah, who's this?
It's Michelle Pon.
Oh, hi, Michelle. Yep, that's probably
Hi.
you then. Because we have a few folks...
Is there a way that I can listen on headphones, or is it completely by telephone?
No, you can listen by headphones going in through the Teams join meeting. Did you not come in through
Jacquie
the
Gahagan
Teams meeting?
is now joining.
Able to do it, but it's okay.
Because that's how you'll be seeing all the PowerPoints that people will be presenting. There was a link. I sent it out by email this morning, but I also sent it. It also went to those who signed up, who registered.
Right.
Do you have the link?
Well, I had a link that I clicked on in my Office 365.
Hi, I'm Cynthia.
I'm Brett.
Hi, Brett. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Apparently the cab came. Okay, so we're getting ready to start. We're just waiting for our first speaker, who was here earlier at 11, so I know she's there. Jackie, are you there with us?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great, Jackie. You were showing up in the thing, so I was just making sure you were there. Now, do you have slides to share?
No.
Okay, good. That works. Okay, so we're getting ready to start. Sorry. I was just checking everybody's audio. Okay. Wow. I'm not going to stick this on. So I've got the mic now. Welcome everybody to the forum on serving the needs of the LGBTQ2S plus community. I know I'm using the longer acronym and it may not be the one that everybody uses, but that is the one we are using at CAUL for now. And hopefully we'll learn more about that as well when we hear later from some of our speakers about the usage and terminology and things of that nature. So welcome everybody. We have a bunch of folks online, so you can see all their initials on the bottom. We also have a chat going, so for those online, if you... Okay, just one sec. I'm going to try clipping it. See if that's easier. Okay, so can everybody hear me? Online? I'm not sure if it's working as well. So welcome everybody. I'm Cynthia Holt. I'm the Executive Director of CAUL. There's some new faces in the room I haven't met before, so I will say hi. And we have some new faces in the room that are actually new to CAUL as well. But I won't go around getting people to introduce themselves. I just got to make sure everybody sounds okay on the... Yep, okay, we've got good audio online as well. So I'd like to start the meeting by acknowledging that we are... Now, we are at Holland College, but we have a lot of virtual members coming in from all across the 4 provinces. So when we do our territorial acknowledgement, we do it for all 4 provinces. That's just our the way we do it because we are all spread out and we are all virtually attending or situated here. So the Council of Atlantic Universities represents member libraries from across the region, all of whom sit on the unceded and traditional territories of First Peoples. In Newfoundland and Labrador, our libraries sit on the homelands of the Inuit of Nunavut. I'm working on that one. And Nunachukavut, the Innu of Nitassinan, the Beothuk, and the Mi'kmaq peoples. In Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia, we find our friends and colleagues situated on the territory of the Mi'kmaq. In New Brunswick, libraries are found on the land of our Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. We at CAUL-CBUA wish to express our sincerest gratitude to the First Peoples who share their ancestral homelands with us all. So I'm going to start off with just a few just logistical points. First is, if anybody hasn't found it, the bathrooms are just down this hallway on the right side. The men's bathroom comes first, and then the women's bathroom, in case you're looking. If anybody hasn't gotten their chit for their nutrition break, you can see Patricia right there. She has, so you can get coffee, tea, something to eat. You can use it now, or you can use it later at the break. We will be having a break later in the meeting. And we have quite a lineup of speakers today. Some will be here in the room with us. Others will be speaking virtually. So we have 5 minutes in between each speaker to set up. So there will be little breaks here and there. And then we also have a big break at 2:30. So I think I've got all the logistical questions done. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. And we got some more people joining us. So I'm going to start off by introducing our first speaker, who will be online. Just in case anybody online is wondering, there will not be any slides. So just in case you're wondering, I am not seeing the slides. There are no slides to see, so don't worry about it. But you will hear our speaker. She is also online. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Jacquie Gahagan. She is the Director of Gender and Health Promotion Studies Unit at Dalhousie University, and she's going to speak to us about partnering with libraries to increase visibility, and specifically about initiatives that she is doing at Dal and in the community around her. So if you would like to start us off, Jackie, that would be greatly appreciated.
Great, Cynthia, thank you very much. If you can't hear me, please let me know. I hope that that this is a clear enough line for you. I tried to get into the other system, the Microsoft Teams system, and couldn't do it, so hopefully this works. So, bonjour à tous et merci de votre invitation à parler avec vous aujourd'hui. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to speak with you today about the work we're doing in relation to augmenting visibility of LGBTQ2S+ populations through the Dalhousie University Library system. And just a little note that October is actually LGBT History Month, so I think this is a very timely discussion. And for those of you who are in Halifax or will be in Halifax on Wednesday, I would encourage you to come to our public event Wednesday at the University Club from 5 until 7 p.m. And you'll hear more details about our Nova Scotia LGBTQ Seniors Archive project at that time. Now, before I get into my main comments, I wanted to start with a very short story. And it goes like this. As an undergraduate student in sociology, I had the good fortune of working part-time in a university library in what was then referred to as reference services. And part of my job was to work with the reference librarians in processing new reference materials and also making sure that they made their way to the stacks. I think the best part of my job was the opportunity to spend quality time wandering around the stacks, and while there, poking around and looking for materials on LGBTQ2S+ content, from our histories to our travels to our contributions to various academic disciplines to textbooks of all sorts, each telling a different but equally important story about our lives and rendering visible the lived experiences of our queer, gay, lesbian, bi, trans, and other gender diverse people in a sea of thousands and thousands of books that essentially made no reference to us. For me, as an undergrad, I relished my time in the library and in exploring where and how we as LGBTQ2S+ people were included in this massive campus-wide resource. Seeing our lives reflected in materials in the library was a welcome counterbalance to the lack of visibility off campus, and perhaps more to the point, the homophobic and transphobic hate-filled misrepresentations of our lives in popular media, in the newspaper, on TV, and so on. More recently, in my life as a university professor, and more specifically as an LGBTQ2S+ health researcher, I'm often asked to explain to funding agencies how LGBTQ2S+ health issues are different from heterosexual populations, or better yet, how many LGBTQ2S+ individuals are impacted by health condition X or Y. The lack of visibility of our populations in health research data and elsewhere is an issue I believe we can play a role in contributing to solutions. In my work here in Montreal with the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, we are trying to address the dearth of data about our communities in an effort to build better health policies and services to address the unique health and social issues facing our communities. So in other words, how can we make informed policy decisions when we do not have the data we need to inform these? This is part of the complex choreography, I would argue, of addressing LGBTQ2S+ erasure in all facets of society. So this leads me to the three important takeaway messages I want to stress in this brief talk. First, the importance of partnerships with allies. Second, the need for meaningful inclusion. And third, the ways in which visibility matters to LGBTQ2S+ lives, both within and outside the academy. So let's start with partnerships with allies. And I would like to just start off by saying I'm so very grateful to have this current partnership with the Killam Library at Dalhousie University, particularly in relation to building our Nova Scotia LGBT Seniors Archive as a fixture in the Killam archival collection. Having reached out to a variety of decision makers at Dal over the years, I was pleasantly surprised to find interesting partnerships in unexpected places. Both Donna Bourne-Tyson and Michael Moosberger have been keen partners and allies with this project from the initial phase of offering a letter of support to the funding application for this project through to offering archival support of all sorts and making this project a reality. I firmly believe that this project would not have been successfully funded if not for this important partnership. The second key takeaway message I hope that you will glean from this talk is the need for meaningful inclusion. So in terms of inclusion, I'd like to think that we all are well past the issue of tokenism in solving complex health and social issues. Inclusion, including in library holdings and resources, plays a crucial role in rendering LGBTQ2S+ lives visible. And more to the point, I believe that we can all play an important role in ramping up meaningful inclusion. For example, a core value of the Nova Scotia Seniors LGBT Archive project is a meaningful inclusion of members of our community. In this case, through the Department of Seniors grant that brought this project from an abstract idea, or something that I was thinking we absolutely must do before the generation of LGBTQ seniors are no longer with us to tell us their stories, all the way through to the current reality of having funds to hire both an LGBT senior from the community as well as an MLIS student to work together in collecting data and processing archival materials that will make up an important part of the NS, Nova Scotia LGBT Seniors Archive. So this intergenerational lens is important to meaningful inclusion, not only for members of our communities, but also in providing the important historical context for the archival materials collected, and hence the need for this intergenerational approach. My third point that I would like to share is the issue around why visibility matters. Here I would argue that we all benefit from more diverse spaces, including public and academic library spaces. And this is crucial in increasing visibility of difference and using this space as a means to explore diverse opinions and ways of knowing the world around us. So increasing visibility through projects such as the Nova Scotia LGBT Seniors Archive, the dedicated meeting space in the Killam Library for the Queer Faculty and Staff Caucus to get together, and in sort of an unrelated but connected project is the sale of Dalhousie University lanyards at the Dal bookstore, all matter in terms of visibility. They seem small, but they actually add something, I believe, to the landscape of diversity in terms of visibility for our communities. So although these initiatives are all aimed at increasing visibility, they can sometimes be met with some opposition. I think it's important to understand possible pushback that we may encounter in our efforts to increase visibility, and that we need to make bold decisions about how we respond to intolerance, hatred, a lack of respect for diversity. So rendering visible, I would argue, in safe, affirming, and culturally competent and appropriate ways of those who have for decades been socially, economically, or otherwise marginalized by social systems that are meant to benefit us all, such as the education system, should be our focus, should be our collective focus. So going back into the closet is quite simply not an option. So to sort of wrap things up, I just want to restate the importance of finding creative, innovative partnerships in addressing LGBTQ2S+ erasure. And from my perspective, partnerships with allies, meaningful inclusion, and visibility matter in the lives of LGBTQ2S+ students, faculty, and staff, as on campus as well as off campus. And as such, I'm grateful to the wonderful partnerships and allies that I have at Dalhousie University, and I look forward to contributing further to this conversation and addressing LGBTQ2S+ erasure. I just wanted to also note that in the Seniors Archive project, we specifically use LGBT and not LGBTQ2S+, in part because the generation that we are focusing on for the Archives project are actually the baby boomer generation. So those are people that are 55 years of age and older, grew up at a time when using the term queer was considered pejorative, and at the time when this cohort of folks from our community be coming out or becoming adults, the two-spirit component was not, I would argue, well integrated into the current understanding of that community. So you will see in some places the purposeful use of LGBT in relation to the seniors project, but when we're talking about these populations more broadly, you'll see a variation on the theme of LGBTQ2S+. And again, I think it's an important point, I think, to make, but it also, I can certainly understand how it creates challenges in terms of how that acronym might change over time, and how that can create some concern about who's included and who's absent. And this is an important component of, I think, grappling with the notion of erasure. And so from my perspective, when in doubt, ask the communities that you're working with. So for example, I had a call from a colleague who runs or is the lead for the equity committee for the Dalhousie University Libraries, and he actually said, how do you want me to refer to you? And how do you want me to describe the kinds of holdings or the kinds of issues that you would like us to bring forward in our equity committee discussions? I think that is really important in terms of understanding those historical and generational differences in terms of how people might identify within what is affectionately referred to as the rainbow community. So I think there are lots of opportunities to engage with people in those conversations to determine what are the appropriate ways to address issues of erasure, and how can we do that in a way that is actually respectful, meaningful, and inclusive. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a hammering sound in the space that I'm in. I hope that is not creating a problem for people. I'm finding it very distracting.
No, we can barely hear it.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
good.
most of the time you were speaking, I never heard it at all.
Oh, good. Okay, great. I also wanted to just mention one of the other partnerships that we had is with the Dalhousie Fund for the LGBT Seniors Archive. I actually went and met with, Michael Moosberger and I both went and met with the folks over at the Advancement Office, which deals with issues of funding of projects, etc. And we were invited to meet with a colleague of Michael's, and out of that actually came a crowdfunding project, and the university provided really, I wish you could see it, really lovely rack cards that we have sent out to people across the university to, number one, increase their awareness about this project, and number two, to encourage them to contribute funding, recognizing that the funds that are raised through this crowdfunding project actually will fund the two research assistants working on this project. And as I said, one of them is a senior from the community, and the other is a queer identified MLIS student who I think together make a fantastic team. But in order to keep them going, keep them funded in collecting archival materials from across Nova Scotia, we need to ensure that we have sufficient funds available to continue funding them. So I think I will stop there, but I would encourage people to ask questions. If you've got questions or clarification that you would like, please feel free to ask.
So if anybody in the room has a question, we actually have a mic we can pass around. And online, you can feel free to either say it verbally or you can type it in the chat, and we can answer it that way. Anybody in the room have questions for Jackie? Sorry, I didn't mean to have my back to you. I found it quite interesting, Jackie. Thank you for clarifying, because I've seen LGBT. You had put that in your, Michael has it in his title, it is in yours as well. And I wasn't sure why all the other parts weren't there, but so that's actually a very interesting tidbit that I hadn't thought about, that different generations might have those different interpretations of what is the acronym that we should be using with those communities. So the idea that we may have to flex what we use depending on which community we're connecting with is new and novel to me. Well, not necessarily novel. I just mean it's not something I had thought about.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I think this is part of the issue around erasure is that if we're using a variety of different acronyms to describe folks from the rainbow community, it could be could be seen as a political gesture, but it can also be seen as potential erasure of certain populations. And I think that's, again, something that, if in doubt, ask the populations that you're working with what is the most appropriate acronym. There was a point at which instead of the plus, there was an asterisk. I used that on a grant that was going in at a time when the asterisk was being questioned. So in other words, people who fall under the caption of sort of gender diverse or gender non-conforming population didn't like to be referred to as an asterisk. So fair enough. So unfortunately, the paper that got published from that study, I ended up having a number of students from a university in the States reach out to me saying, could you please not refer to us as an asterisk, and sent me a really wonderful paper explaining the position that they actually took forward to their university to ensure that they didn't use that on any of their signage any longer. And I thought that's fantastic, but this is the sort of ebb and flow of identity politics. But at the end of the day, I think that the point is to ensure that we are finding meaningful ways to include people to create greater visibility, but doing it in a way that is actually culturally safe and affirming.
Thank you, Jackie. So are there any questions online or in the room that might have come up? Oh, here we go.
Good afternoon. It's Susan Clayle, University Librarian at Memorial University of Newfoundland, and I want to say thank you very much for your presentation. You've given me a lot to think about to take back to my institution. I wanted to ask you a quick question about partnerships and the partnerships that you have with Dalhousie and everything and we heard many of the things that are going really well with those partnerships, and I think that's absolutely fantastic, the archive that you're growing within the library. I'm curious, as you think about those partnerships, if there's anything that's missing or anything that you would like to be there that isn't right now that you could wish for.
Wow, that's a fantastic question. Thank you, Susan. I think Michael Moosberger is probably going to be speaking a little bit about this in his presentation, but one of the things around partnerships is I am affectionately referred to, or depending on who's saying it, I come from away. So I moved to Nova Scotia from Ontario, and I think that because I didn't grow up in Nova Scotia, that the way you I think develop partnerships and nurture those partnerships have a historical connection to people who are from Nova Scotia, and that's a fair point. So I think in the case of some materials that have been donated to the Nova Scotia Public Archives that are LGBTQ2S+, I think I hope, and again, I don't want to overstep any sensitivities. I want to recognize those sensitivities, but I also want to engage in reasons. Could we potentially have the largest LGBTQ2S+ archive in the Atlantic region? I still have that in mind. So my wish is that we actually have something comparable to the University of Victoria Trans Archive, which is the largest archive of trans materials in the world. And I think Donna and I had a brief conversation where I said, why can't we do that at Dal? I think one of the issues that would make something like that a reality is making sure that folks who have long-standing historical connections to representing their histories see the value in an archival collection that has everything essentially accessible in one location. And I'm not even sure how feasible that is, but I'm sure Michael will have thoughts on that. But that would be my wish, is can we actually build, the world's largest archival repository of materials that affect the 4 Atlantic provinces, for example. And I've had conversations with a few people who are archivists in other provinces about how are they dealing with this issue, because we're all relatively small provinces. We have rich, diverse histories, but do we have sufficient resources to mount, 4 different or more archives. So I think figuring out how to work in partnership with people and not feeling that it is stealing their thunder or their historical connection to those histories, but rather working collaboratively and collectively in partnership so that we can have that sort of accessible resource. Because I can tell you, when I was an undergrad and grad student, you'd have to do some. This is going to tell you how old I am roughly, but this predates access to the internet. That was a painful process. I mean, you would dig and dig and dig to find any kind of paper resource on the history of, the women's lesbian community in Ottawa, or about Gays of Ottawa Center. I mean, trying to piece together historical documents that are all paper-based, and now we have this gift or curse, depending on the day, of the internet that allows us to have ready access to materials that really, I think would be quite much sought after, not unlike the trans archive at University of Victoria. I mean, essentially, Aaron DeVore, the person who runs that, he actually has a Canada Research Chair at UVic, and the archive is within his research unit. He has scholars from all over the world coming and spending time in his unit in order to access all of this material, physically going into the archive and seeing materials that are not available anywhere else in the world. That's a pretty incredible gift in terms of ensuring that our collective and diverse histories within our rainbow community are captured so that other generations can benefit from that. And I think the other ask is that we've got a generation of baby boomers who are not going to be with us forever. And what we're seeing happening in Halifax is, as you necessarily downsize, as you get older, boxes that were in your basement or in your attic are being thrown out. Or sadly, in cases where an older person from the community passes away and the family next of kin comes in and removes materials, a lot of that ends up in the bin. And so I feel kind of, if we could, and again, I'm sure Michael will have something to say about this, if we could speed up and centralize the process in some form or fashion, I think that would be my wish.
Jackie?
Yes.
Are there any other questions for Jackie? Oh, just a sec, one moment. There's
Well, not a question, but I'll weigh in. Hi, Jackie. It's Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Yes, I have thought about this, and it's actually a meeting that I was at on Friday in Ottawa, dealing with women in STEM, gave me a lot of ideas about, the approach that could be taken, with regard to gathering and acquiring and preserving and making accessible the records and the papers of members of the LGBT community across Atlantic Canada. And I think CAUL could have a really important role in that if they chose to, as a coordinating body, because what's going on at the University of Ottawa, they have a significant collection related to women in STEM, but they are trying to tap into kind of playing a coordinating role to ensure that records that are housed in other archives for that project across Canada are identified and made accessible through one single portal. And I think that's certainly an approach worth investigating with regard to the LGBT community as well, because I'm sure there are collections in many university provincial archives in the region that, it would probably not be realistic to try to bring them all together physically, but if we could bring them together intellectually in some way, I think it would be could be a really dynamic approach to providing access to this material.
I completely agree with that observation, Mike. And I think, again, the wish is that we can do this in a way that preserves these materials before this generation is no longer with us. And that might sound a little bit more morbid, but the reality is we're seeing it happen. And I've been in Nova Scotia for almost 20 years, and in the time I've been here, I've seen this happen where, somebody will send a message out saying this material is going in the tip unless somebody wants to pick it up and put it in their basement. So, we have about 28 people wanting to donate their materials to us, and I think that's fantastic. But the question is, can we do something across the region that would allow us to, even if it is different sort of portals, but it allows you into the same searchable databases using the same kind of interface, so that if I'm in New Brunswick and I want to go physically look at some stuff, I can do that, but I can also then go and search for other materials online. I think that's, I understand that's a huge project, and I think if we have to start somewhere in terms of temporal order, I think it makes sense to start with baby boomers before we lose the opportunity to capture as much of that material as we can.
Thank you, Jackie. Any other questions in the room or online? You can unmute and say your question verbally, or you can type it in the chat, whichever one works for you. And I don't want to steal Michael's thunder, so I was going to ask the question of Jackie, but if Michael, you're going to answer it, I won't ask it. But basically, I'm wondering, what means are you using to reach out into the different parts of the community to make those connections to say, if you are getting rid of your stuff, send it to us? I don't know whether you're going to address that in your presentation, Mike?
I can now that you brought it up.
Sorry. I didn't know whether Jackie would answer it or you would answer it.
No, I can start with that. I mean, basically we have an LGBT senior from the community who has lived here pretty well their entire lives. So they're very well connected in the community, and they know all kinds of people. And we have used social media. So we've got a Facebook page. We've got a couple of other mechanisms to reach out to people, but certainly the word of mouth has worked really well. And as I said, we've got, we're pushing towards 30 people that have materials that they want to contribute. So I think, word of mouth and social media have been the key opportunities to let people know that we're doing this. The crowdfunding from DAL has also helped, because it's on the DAL website, so we've directed people to that. I've written letters to people on and off campus, including the rack card and the link to the archive crowd sourcing, where they can actually see a little bit more about what it entails. And the other piece is that we have a partnership with the Nova Scotia Rainbow Action Project and the Elderberries. We also have the Halifax Public Libraries as a partner, and so they're also helping us get the word out to the community in a broader way that we can do just in the initial ways I've described.
Thank you, Jackie. That's great. It's nice to know what are the different ways we, and especially in other provinces, might be able to reach out and make those connections if we don't already have established relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Lindsay online had a comment. The discoverability of the material collected for this project, the Memory Nova Scotia Archival Research Portal, could be a system replicated across the region through either provincial and archival councils or CAUL potentially. So there is the idea of the archival councils that might actually come into play in this project.
Great.
Any other questions or comments from online or in the room? Thank you very much, Jackie. I got a lot out of this, and I'm hoping others did as well, especially the idea that this could happen on a regional scale, or you could start provincially and see and work our way up to regional, but that's an idea for us to make sure we look at this in the future as something potentially the CAUL could potentially do or help our members to do.
Yeah, I would just Just in
Yes.
closing, I would hope that CAUL would be involved and figure out how to make this work across the region, because I think, to Michael's point, like having the Council of Atlantic University Libraries actually would have a lot of cachet, I think, with funders and others, because they would see that there is some stewardship beyond what we have funding to do through the Nova Scotia Department of Seniors, for example.
Yes, that is definitely something that CAUL is interested in investigating and exploring, although I can't commit anybody in the room to anything at this point, but it's definitely an idea that is now on the table that we can take back and explore. So thank you very much, Jackie. This has been fantastic, and thank you. I know you're in Montreal for a meeting, so thank you for being so generous and sharing your time with us today, and sharing your knowledge and experience about this project. It's been fascinating. I've learned a lot.
Thank you, Cynthia. I wonder if I might just stay on and listen to Michael.
Oh, yeah.
If that's okay.
Stay on as long as you want. You're welcome to stay here for the whole forum, or come and go as you want. You can just come in and out as you. The agenda is on our website under webinars if you want to know who's speaking when. But otherwise, please feel free to stay with us. So our next speaker. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. So I'm just going to head up here. Our next speaker is Mike Moosberger, and he is actually going to continue the conversation from the Dalhousie Libraries and Archives perspective on developing this Nova Scotia Seniors LGBT Community Archive. And so we're going to take 5 minutes while we switch over. Yep, so one moment. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Did everybody get the wireless username and password? Excellent. Okay, so you're up on the screen now, Mike.
Okay.
Down arrow moves you forward.
Okay.
Up arrow moves you back.
Okay.
And you see what you're doing over here. Or you can look at the screen whichever way you like.
Okay.
The camera's here, so making sure we got it. So,
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you. Can people online hear Mike?
Yep.
It'll be a first if people can't hear me. I keep getting complaints still on my floor in the library. We're too loud.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, so I will pick up the conversation where Jackie left off and talk about some of the things we've done, and maybe get into a little more depth from the archival perspective of the work that we've undertaken so far. Here's and the two people that were hired for the senior project. And fortunately for me, one of the student that was hired, the sim student, was actually working for me already. So she was used to the way we were doing things in the archives, and it really helped with her quick understanding of the approaches that we were going to take with regard to this project. And I basically was serving as a resource with regard to how to do things with regard to archival collections. What are we looking for? What kind of documentation needed to be created? And I provided the team with a number of those things. I created a draft terms of reference for an advisory committee, and I think advisory committees for these kinds of projects are critical. Getting the community to be involved in the project and getting them to have a sense of ownership of the project is really important, because it really provides momentum, enthusiasm, and all those kinds of things related to the project, and that's what keeps the project going. They were, you know, because both Lydia, who's the student, and Dan are not trained archivists, I provided them with a collections inquiry, because the reality is, with the way this was going to work with the partnership with the Dal libraries, they would go out and meet with people initially, look at their materials, get a sense of what they had, and they needed something. They needed a document that they could document all of that content on, because then it would come down to me making the decision on what we were going to acquire and how would we acquire it, and under what conditions. I mean, like most archives, we have a to the donation of that material. Oh. Okay. A little bit towards my mouth. Is that better? Okay. So one of the interesting things that the project was to document, they wanted to do oral histories with these individuals as well, which I think is a great idea, but they had no idea. As part of the oral history could be used. I mean, I've been a part of a couple of oral histories where the documentation was not sufficient, and then it came to question whether or not the oral history could actually be made accessible to anybody. And to do oral histories and then not be able to provide access to them is kind of it's not a kind of time. And then because a lot of photographs that they had preliminary identified within the community, I wanted. Okay. Okay. All right. Pressing the down. That's the next. Yep. Oh. Okay. And then more of the timeline up to the present. Jackie mentioned a meeting with the advancement team about the crowdfunding project, and then we had a lot of discussion administratively about where the money's going to sit, and because the money's intended to be used, at least for the most part, to process the collection, it was determined that at least temporarily or initially that the money would go into my annual fund, so then I could administer it on behalf of the project. And the team is constantly in contact with me with regard to various things, and so we've had regular communication. Even when I'm on my way back from holidays, and I got about 5 or 6 emails while I've been gone the last 2 weeks from either Dan or Lydia asking questions about things related to the various project. Okay. Just some background on the Dal Archives. I don't think I need to go into this for any great. We've been around since 1970, so next year we celebrate our 50th anniversary as a University Archives. We collect in a broad area. We collect the institutional records of the university, but also a lot of private records. So this kind of project is very, we have other social active citizen group kind of records as part of the collection. So this kind of fit in. And we have, the records are housed in different areas, mostly in the Killam Library, but we do have a satellite operation at the Agricultural Archives in Truro. And we do photographic, digital reformatting, and digitization, and that's, I think, one of the things that appealed to the team as part of this project as well, because we had those capacities for material that maybe the donor did not want to part with, but we wanted to capture to ensure that it would not disappear. We had the capacity to do that as part of our digitization or digital reformatting services. So we started by setting some priorities. What collections would be processed in a given year were going to be determined on a variety of different priorities. Available internal library resources, existing and anticipated research demand, donor and university support, and available grant funding. And these, I explained these, we had a meeting of the elderberries, a group of advisors from the senior LGBT community. And I explained this to them that, yes, these collections would come in and material that we can find money to support the processing of always gets higher, comes to the top of the priority list because we have a dedicated resources. And I think that's what triggered really to at least a certain extent the crowdfunding initiative that Jacquie has spoken to you about already. I think all of you are aware, working in universities, that archives have backlogs. And if any of you are working with a university archives that does not have a backlog, raise your hands because I'd like to meet you. I think we all deal with those, and it's certainly an issue with regard to any new acquisition area. Can we handle the intake? Because the intake can be overwhelming very quickly if you're not sure, you don't understand what the acquisition process is, the scope and volume of material you could be looking at. So we wanted to make sure that the community understood that there were going to be some challenges from our perspective with regard to taking this initiative on. Okay. So these are some of the key questions that I was asking. What do you want the archives to be? And we came to agreement that it would document the legacy of the social, economic, and other contributions of the senior LGBT Nova Scotia community. And that was that still is the current working premise of the project. And that over time, we would identify, preserve, and make accessible the records of the LGBT community in the province. And that we would engage the LGBT community to identify and seek advice from the most important individuals and organizations whose records should be included in this organization. So those are some of the things that were discussed at the initial advisory services or advisory committee meeting. Okay. Then we had some discussions just amongst the team about the oral history program, and that the oral histories would be undertaken with the donor as part of the donation process for the materials. We started having initial discussions about the digitization of material, and those discussions are ongoing because a lot of people don't understand the cost of digitizing material. It's if you want to do it well, it's a very labor intensive and very expensive proposition, and I'm preaching to the choir here. I know that, you're all certainly aware of that. If you want to make digital information available, and it's got to have the correct metadata, it's got to be preserved in the right formats, it's got to be easily discoverable, all of those kinds of things. And so we wanted to make them sure, the advisory committee, and we'll make them aware of the work that was going to be involved if we selected things for digitization. And then what would the relationship of the senior archives with the Archives, Canadian Lesbian and Gay Archives, which is in Toronto, and the Transgender Archives at University of Victoria. So those are just preliminary discussions that we were having. Okay. We talked about if private individuals donated their material to DAL, there was the possibility of having that material appraised for monetary value and that the donor would receive a tax receipt, because we wanted to make them aware that that was maybe, for some people that might be a little reluctant, that might be an enticement to have them donate their material. Currently, we've already received 2, I think maybe even 3 collections now that have arrived. And it's interesting because we've had to kind of rethink a little bit our appraisal criteria. Because for a lot of material that we accept normally, some of the material that we're finding in these collections already, we would just, it would be considered ephemera. And for the LGBT community, we're discovering that that's not the case. These are important artifacts and important components of the history of that community, like buttons and posters and newsletters and things like that, that we would just, in the normal course of processing some other types of archival collections, we would just discard. But for this project, we've had to rethink our appraisal criteria to ensure that we take the community's knowledge and interest in this material into consideration when we're doing the appraisal work on that. And also, and Jacquie mentioned the partnership with the Halifax Public Library. The chief librarian there, Osa Cashin, has already indicated that they would like to mount, probably not this year because we're in LGBTQ month already, but maybe next year an exhibit in the main library displaying some of this material. So we're having to rethink how we're going to do this, and that has implications, both resource and knowledge based, because we don't normally preserve artifactual material or three-dimensional materials. Now we're looking at, okay, are we looking at different types of boxes? Are we looking at different types of description? Are we describing it as a museum material as opposed to archival material? And those have different implications with regard to metadata, taxonomies, all of those kinds of things. So we're certainly having to look at some of that stuff. Like the LGBT publications. That's a decision we've determined we're going to have them cataloged into Novanet and then added to the archive's reference collection. So they would be far more widely accessible than on our ATOM archival holdings database, because they would end up in WorldCat or whatever discovery layer Novanet is using these days. And I can't read the bottom. Digital copies would have, yes, and the digital copies we would create our own metadata for that type of material as well. Okay. This is just the front page of our holdings catalog, ATOM. You can't see it here, but what we've done when I was the head of the GIS Center, I got one of the GIS analysts to create a map for us. And now we update it regularly with every collection, the geographic subheadings that appear for a collection get added to the map. And so, and the circles on the map get bigger and bigger the more collections related to a geographic area. So I think, you know, that could be really useful for this, or if the project expands beyond Nova Scotia, that we would, people would be able to see geographically where these collections come from. Okay. Some preliminary thoughts on the project. And these are just off the top of my head. You know, like the volume and importance of the material is beyond our expectations. I mean, like the first donor I went to see with the team, we counted, I think we're estimating over 500 photographic albums. And you think there's maybe 200 photographs per album? I can't do the math in my head. Are we talking 10,000 photographs? You know, like that potentially, you know, one collection of material. And then you have to make a determination with photographs. How well described are they? Do you need to keep every one of them? Can you do a selection? All of those kinds of things. But it's a rich, very, very rich collection. This woman photographed the lesbian community in Nova Scotia for 50 years. You know, so I mean, it's a terrific resource, but it's going to take a huge amount of effort to make the criteria, appraisal criteria, applying the appraisal criteria, and then catalog all of those photographs. And the second bullet wasn't surprising to me, but I thought I should point it out. These relationships always take more time than you think they're going to take. I mean, I would estimate that I'm spending at least a couple of hours a week related to this project. You know, just responding to emails, dealing with the administrative paperwork related to new donations, all of those kinds of things. So it does take time. And a lot of time working with the team, because as I said, they're not professionally trained on what the right approaches are with regard to acquisition, what their role is versus my role or the archive's role, you know, in the whole acquisition process. So it's maybe a word of caution, but just so you're aware that these types of projects do take a fair amount of time on both sides. And it's like every other community, no matter what you're collecting thematically, this is not a homogeneous group. There are members of the LGBT community that have contacted me directly expressing concern about the direction of the project. And I'm, you know, I don't want to be in the middle of that, but I would say, you know, just basically saying, well, I'm here as a resource. If you want to use me as a resource outside of this project and are interested in talking about your own archival collection, I'm happy to do that. That's a service I consider should be doing as a professional archivist and someone with 35 years of experience in the profession. But it's a very, because of this community in particular, I think you have to be aware of people's feelings, maybe even more so than when dealing with other groups. Because it's a sensitive and very personal area that you're dealing with regard to them. Yes.
So along the veins of sensitivity, sorry, this is Patricia Doucette, Holland College. You had said that one
one donor or one person you had met with had over 500.
Yes.
Within that, I know growing up in the 80s and 90s, people were very reluctant to identify as LGBTQ. So with this, all of these photographs, have you developed any kind of policies about identifying people who are in them, or only using people who are, it's kind of tricky. Some people who would be in them might not want to be identified.
That's absolutely a discussion that we've started to have and can need to continue to have. And that's part of the donation agreement with the donor about what is the, what do you see as the access requirements or the access that you want to, provide to this material?
Right.
Should it be closed for 20 years? Should it be closed for 30 years? So to ensure that everybody that is conceivably in the photographs is deceased or beyond caring, it's one of the most tricky parts of my job is to balance what is reasonable restrictions versus which restrictions that make absolutely no sense.
Right.
And I've been on both ends of those discussions, and it's a very difficult conversation to have. Some donors, no, this is my stuff, just make it all accessible and let the chips fall where they may. Okay, but then we have to manage that restriction.
Exactly.
And that's, they won't come back at the donor, they'll come back at the institution. So I'm often more cautious than the donor when they have that kind of blanket, let's make it all available. Because, I mean, there is nude photography in this collection of, women running around the woods, on one of their retreats, and they are all naked, okay. How do we restrict those photos? A lot of them are pretty generic. I mean, and yes, but in this community in particular, people that, do we have to go, or does the team have to go and ensure that everybody that's in a photograph is, opts, if they haven't come out, it's a huge challenge, and maybe Jackie wants to jump in on that one, because I don't have the a bulletproof answer for you on how to do that.
Amy Lorenz online has shared that in the chat that Tara Robertson's blog is important in this regard, and I'll share the link to that blog afterwards.
That's great. I think that's everything for that bullet. Yep, and then I'm done. So questions. And I'm a minute and 30 seconds under, which is great for me.
Anybody online have any questions for Mike? You can either type them in the chat, or you can unmute and say them verbally, or anybody in the room. Oh, here we go. Just one sec. Somebody in the room.
Hi there. This is Emily from Holland College, the Student Engagement and Instructional Librarian. Thank you so much for your talk, Mike. It was very informative. I was wondering if you've been working in collaboration with the Nova Scotia museums to kind of handle the posters and buttons and non-paper materials that you've been getting and having to kind of navigate through that.
We haven't, because, and I'll give you we think they're an integral part of the collection itself, the two collections we've acquired so far. So I'm not a great proponent of seeing collections split. I think, for the most part, that material I think we have the expertise, or we can develop the expertise internally to manage that sufficiently. If it was something, if we were talking about works of art or other things that would, fabrics or, things like that, then I would certainly call upon the museum or a conservator to at least get their opinion and some expertise on how we should be managing that material. But for this stuff, it's mostly either paper or metal based, and it's in relatively good condition, given what I've been able to see of it. So I think for the time being, we're going to try to keep it as an integral part of the existing collection. For us to do that, then we'd have to go back to the donor anyway and say, okay, you know, we cannot manage this. Do you want it back, or do you want us to try to approach the Nova Scotia Museum and see if they would integrate it into their collection? But I think that would be probably last resort sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Anybody else in the room or online has questions for Mike? I'm not seeing anybody in the chat. And nobody in here. Well, thank you very much, Mike. This was fantastic. Especially if anybody is thinking of looking at developing an archive of this, of a similar nature, or of that. We know who to call on because he's paving the way for us in terms of dealing with materials of this type, because as Patricia noted, there are a lot of questions that may not come up with some other archives that are very important to ask with archives of this type, and archives that might be of a sensitive nature. So our three next panelists are not yet here. So this is an opportunity for you to catch up on your email, chat, whatever you want, chat amongst yourselves in the chat. And hopefully our presenters will be here very soon. Oh, do you have a question? No. Oh, okay, you have to turn it on. Yeah. So those online, we should be back. The presenters are supposed to be here at 1:20, so that's when hopefully we will be back starting again.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Jacquie Gahagan
is now exiting.
So maybe we can just wait a few minutes and just until Rory, see if Rory.
So I'll just tell the folks online that we're just setting up. Everybody online, we're just setting up. Our panelists have arrived, so we'll be starting at 1:20ish. So just hold your horses online.
I feel like a teacher. I would pass out some form. I'm not Oh, yeah. Don't want to wander around, meet everybody.
Yes. That does not matter at all. There we go. Just making sure I hit the ball. Very nice to meet you.
Oh, that's okay. It's okay. We see a chance to be normal.
It looks dark on there, but it's fine on that.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
Yeah, because what you see online is not exactly what you see on the screen.
So I think Jay was gonna go over those, but if they don't show up, then
Okay.
we'll just, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I didn't get to ask. I asked the question, but I didn't hear it. So this is being recorded. We are fine with whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
I did ask them and they were fine. I just didn't get back to you.
Sorry. No, I just want to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to touch you. I just want to make sure before, because I can always edit that out or put it behind the.
I never know what
the
I'm gonna
login.
say, so.
Oh, I just know that,
use that
you know, some
disclaimer.
people may not want to be out there in the internet type
Oh,
thing.
right.
In the general internet, so I always ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
that's true, yeah, but I'm good.
And I'm
Yeah,
gonna
me
get
too,
these
yeah.
before I forget.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
So Jay.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Oh, that's
Thank you.
yours.
Well, Rory, yeah, maybe. Yeah. I did check. Oh, there was? Okay. I can, oh, sure. Okay, great. Oh, I'm in the lobby, I don't see anyone. Yeah, they're out there. It's Facebook, right? Oh, yeah.
So used to.
Ah, thank you. Yeah, I'd love some. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Hey, Rory. Awesome. All right, we're probably good to go. Are you breathing? We have 13 seconds. Go. Relax. Water, not vodka. Awesome.
So if anybody has any questions, Dory, because they're going to be presenting, but there's also, it's supposed to be an interactive session. So you can either grab the mic, hand it around. I'll have this one as well. But I just want to give everybody a heads up, this is an interactive session. So, one moment. Whoops. Right. This one here, music. So welcome back, everybody. For those online, we are starting again because we wish to keep ourselves on time. So joining us today, we are excited to have Treena Smith, who is the Director of Student Affairs at UPEI. And with her as well, we have two recent graduates of the University of Prince Edward Island. First, we have Rory Starkman, and in the middle, we have Jacquie Gahagan. And this is going to be an interactive session, as I explained to the folks in the room. They will be talking and presenting, but they will also be looking for interaction with us. Because this is a conversation, a dialogue. So if you want to, you can unmute yourself, ask questions as we go along, or you can write a question in the chat if you prefer to do it that way, and I'll relay it on to the room. But with that, we will begin. And thank you very much for joining us and being so open to sharing your knowledge and your experiences with us.
Great. Thanks, Cynthia. Hopefully people can hear, so you'll navigate the online stuff. Okay, awesome. So as Cynthia said, my name's Treena Smith, and I am currently the Director of Student Affairs at UPEI and also a member of the 2S LGBTQ community. So I'll kind of be presenting on two different levels, and this is where the hats change, as they do for everybody. You know, as an administrator of a fairly large department at a university, and also as a member of the, what I refer to as the LGBTQ community, but it's within the community, we've decided that really it should be the 2S LGBT community. So Two-Spirited being our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, having the kind of first introduction to the Two-Spirited queer community, which has been, the Aboriginal community has been welcoming of Two-Spirited LGBTQ people for centuries. So within our little community here on PEI, but I think also more broadly than that, we've decided that the 2S should be first in the litany of letters. And you know, when we met last week, just to kind of chat about this, you know, I looked at the form that you guys have today, which is a really stellar lineup of kind of presentations. We could probably do a presentation on the acronyms of the community, right? Yeah, I've been a member of the queer community for, well, as long as I've been alive, but out for years, like 30 years. So I was just saying to Jay in the waiting, when we were waiting in the foyer, that you know, when I joined the LGB community, it was LGB, right? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and that's it. I can remember vividly when the T was added, the transgendered, actually at that time it was transsexual. And so, you know, there's been lots of changes, lots of questions, and now we're in an era where there's lots and lots of questions. So, you know, I think having two lenses, and also, you know, working at an institution as you folks do, you know, it's challenging sometimes to make amends with both sides of your person. So the other thing I wanted to say is that in my experience, librarians have always been kind of social justice advocates and very high on my radar for people that are trustworthy and knowledgeable. And so presenting to you folks, you know, is an honor, but also you probably know just as much as we do. So I appreciate being asked to, no. I appreciate being asked to speak, and but really and truly libraries, again, before the internet, which some of you may remember, libraries were the place where I found out about things. Right? So you know, squirrel away in the corner and look at the, you know, the lesbian and the gay, the one gay book in the Charlottetown Library. I, you know, grew up in Charlottetown. So, you know, you have the one gay book, and really the library was the place where you could go to find this information out in private, right? Before the internets and before the Google. You know, so I have a real kinship to the Confederation Center Library, and they do marvelous, fantastic work. So, you know, I hope this is an interactive dialogue that we can just chat about. You know, the one thing that I do, and we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we can get into kind of the meat of things. And that's really how it's going to be structured. But I'd like to start with a story, and I think all three of us will kind of tell a story to kind of frame the narrative that we are going to chat about for the next hour or so. People always say that there's lots of things right now in the world that need our attention, right? Lots and lots of things. People are bombarded with political correctness and bombarded with things that really deserve and need particularly institutional attention and structural attention. And people sometimes think the gays are we're over, we're done with, we're dealt with, we can be packaged up in a little box and sent off, and that really we don't need to pay attention to discrimination and those sorts of things within the gay community. And I'm here to tell you that that's not over, and that really and truly we do need to pay attention to the 2S LGBTQ community, and that the way we look and the way that we act and the way that we carry ourselves through the world matters. So what I mean by that is I have a lot easier time moving through the world and interacting with people because I pass as somebody that's straight. I don't have the typical short hair. I don't have the typical, I don't wear army boots, maybe at Halloween, but that's about it. So I navigate the world in a very different way than my partner does. My partner is more of a butch femme. Sorry, butch femme. Oh my God, she'd lose her mind. Scratch that from the tape. She's not femme at all. She's butch. And so her interactions with the world are very different than my interactions with the world, based on simply on how we look. We know that that happens with everybody, right? It's not just butch lesbians that can't navigate the world. But I think that that matters, and I think framing that and just naming that matters. Even with that, we had an experience that is not uncommon within the gay community or the queer community, unfortunately. So housing on PEI is a huge issue right now. And we sold a house in Charlottetown, and we were building a house out in the country. So now I live in the country. And so we were we were building a house. So we needed housing for 5 or 6 months. And finding an apartment, period, in Charlottetown is very difficult. We found, through a real estate agent that I know, we got hooked up with this person who was living at the cottage, wanted to rent her house for 5 to 6 months. Beautiful situation. It's exactly what I needed. She was charging an exorbitant amount of money. We were able to pay that exorbitant amount of money. I had chatted on the phone with her 3 times, and we had great conversations. She knew that there was 2 of us. She knew that my partner was with me. She knew that we had a cat, and she knew that we had a dog, right? We talked, like I said, 3 times. We had great conversations. We were like old best friends. So I said, so she said she'd rent us the place. So great. So I said, but I'd like to see it because I don't want to, I want to know where I'm living. So I said, okay, we made a plan to meet at her place at this time. So we were there early. Lesbians are early to everything. We were there early. And so we waited for this woman to show up. So the woman showed up and she pulled in next to us and we were sitting in our vehicle and she was sitting in hers. We got out of the truck and I said, oh my God, it's so nice to meet you. We've chatted on the phone, blah, blah, blah. I said, this is my partner. And all of a sudden, we within the community know the look. And I thought to myself, we're not going to get this place. She's not going to rent to us. Anyways, I tried everything. I pulled out every trick in the book through our little tour through her house, right? I threw out boards of directors I'm on. I threw out my position at the university, threw out the community, threw out I lived here my whole life, right? Threw out all of the things that normally I wouldn't really throw out, but we needed the place. Like I needed to live there because we had no other place to live. Anyway, we didn't end up renting that place. She actually said at the end of the tour, I knew she wasn't going to rent to us because we were 2 lesbians. I knew that in my heart of hearts. And this was in May, by the way, 2018, right? So we're not talking 25 years ago. We're talking May 2018. I knew and she knew that I knew. And my partner's oblivious. She was just like, oh, we didn't get the place. So at the end, I said, okay, we'll take it. And she said, well, I actually have to think about it because I think my niece might be staying here. Right? And I said, great. I said, well, why don't I give you a call tomorrow? I said, you have the right to rent your house to anybody you want. It's your house. And we kind of left it at that. So when I called, she didn't answer her phone and I left a message. And then she did call me back, God love her. And she said, I'm like allergic to cats. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you knew we had a cat like a month ago. And then I just said, again, you're able to rent to whoever you want to rent to, but let's not, say we're allergic to cats, right? Let's call a spade a spade. And I didn't call her out on it because I was actually in the McDonald's drive-thru waiting for a coffee. It was early in the morning and I thought, well, we'll just carry on with that. But that's typical. That is not typical. I've heard that. And again, I'm very privileged. I have lots of privileges behind me. And still at that, this woman who just didn't want to rent to lesbians, right? She was probably in her 60s. Yeah. And like I said, a very nice woman, obviously uneducated and just couldn't get over. She was leaving her furniture in her house and she just probably couldn't make that leap, right? So, and again, so I tell that story to say we still need to do a lot of work on these things. So I'm going to be quiet now and I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues to chit chat and tell their stories.
All right. So yeah, I'm far away from the mic. There we go. I'm Jay Gallant. Is that
working?
Oh. No.
Here, use this one.
Okay, thanks. Hello. There you go. Yeah, I'm Jay Gallant, and I've been an activist on the island for the 2S LGBTQ plus community for about 15 years now, I guess. I started, first of all, in the school system with PFLAG, and at that time there was a zero bullying policy that included things such as race and gender and a number of different grounds, but sexual orientation and gender identity definitely weren't included in that. So we were advocating for that to be included, and so speaking to guidance counselors and teachers and administrators, and sometimes actually speaking to students as well. So that was kind of my first foray into that, and that wasn't that long after I'd come out, actually. So I didn't come out as queer until I was in my 20s, and before that had really struggled a great deal growing up as a queer individual. I didn't come out as trans until I was in my 30s, but definitely was trans right from as far back as I can remember. Just at that age, growing up in the 80s and 90s, not having the language for what that even meant, or just thinking that there was something really, really wrong with me. And the messages I was getting from the community, from school, from church were pretty negative when it came to sexual orientation. So even with that, gender identity was something that was even outside of the sphere of conversation altogether. So for myself, it was a very difficult growing up, and I suppressed a really large part of who I was, and that eventually came out in perfectionism, self-destruction, and a dangerous battle with anorexia. Started in the end of junior high into high school, which is not that uncommon for trans individuals around the time of puberty, because trans individuals, not all, but many of them, experience what's called gender dysphoria, which is that very intense feeling of unease and disconnect with your physical body, specifically the gendered parts of your body. So when I hit puberty, when I started developing breasts and started developing more of a female shape, that's when that dysphoria became very overwhelming. But myself, a lot of the advocacy work that I do now, I do work with Peers Alliance and with the PEI Human Rights Commission, as well as I'm on the Health PEI Trans Steering Committee, which is the purpose is to create pathways to care for trans health on the island. And a lot of the advocacy I do has around creating safe spaces for trans individuals, or inclusive spaces, I think is kind of the better way to say that, for all gender identities. And there's a thing that I've learned through doing these kind of talks with Peers Alliance and different groups is that, and it's very true, and it's been true in my experience, is that oftentimes people from minority groups assume a space is going to be unsafe until proven otherwise. So a lot of the work that I do is about how do we create spaces that are more inclusive, and how do we create spaces in healthcare, especially where trans individuals are able to access the kind of services that they need. And for myself, like I said, it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I was able to come to terms with being trans, because of a lot of the negative messages that I was receiving, and just not seeing anything. Like growing up, going through school, there was definitely never any rainbow flags up or posters up or anything that was saying that a guidance counselor or a therapist or a teacher or anyone was a safe person to talk to about the kind of feelings I was having. In fact, I had a junior high health and phys ed teacher teach a whole class on why it was morally, biologically, spiritually wrong to be gay, and she drew graphic diagrams on the board as well. So that was kind of my experience with queer material in school, I guess. So understandably, I was a lot of that I just kind of stuffed down deep inside and didn't deal with until, fortunately, later in life. And I say fortunately because there are many trans individuals who do unfortunately succumb to suicide and self-harm that goes too far. I was fortunate. I did have a suicide attempt, but I survived it to be able to be here now. But there are many people that I knew in the past who weren't so lucky. So yeah, so that's a big part of kind of the work that I do, and in terms of this talk today, I guess that's a big part of what I'd hope to be able to contribute, is about, you know, as a trans individual or as a member of the 2S LGBTQ community, when it comes to spaces such as libraries, how do we create a space that is inclusive to that individual, and that they feel that this is a place where they can be who they are and they can access the materials that they need in that space.
Next. Can you hear me if I just, I feel like it works so well for Treena. You don't have to get close at all.
I'm loud.
But I'm also loud.
You are
know
loud,
that
actually.
I don't need this. I'll scream. No. So my name's Rory. I'm a non-binary trans person. I use they, them pronouns. And I mean, just sort of, I guess, building a little bit off of what Jay has said. So I actually work for Peers Alliance. So I'm the Youth Services Coordinator for Peers Alliance. For those of you who haven't heard of Peers Alliance, we're a nonprofit organization that works in
a lot of different sort of areas. We focus on sexual health and harm reduction for substance users, but then we also do a lot of programming for the 2S LGBTQ+ community. And so we have a youth drop-in, we have an adult drop-in. We're working right now to create more of like a family drop-in for parents and caregivers who have younger gender creative or trans youth. And so we do a lot of that work. And so I guess a lot of my advocacy and sort of activism has kind of come through that. I was very fortunate that I grew up in Ontario, and so my health education wasn't like, oh, being gay is bad, but also I guess I more come at it from the perspective of erasure. So the fact that just 2S LGBTQ+ issues or identities just weren't talked about. It wasn't that they were labeled as bad or sinful or anything like that, but just that they weren't really talked about. And so for myself, I think like I began by identifying as bisexual and then lesbian and then finding non-binary and trans later, and also just sort of coming to terms with that later, because when you don't hear about it or hear about these identities in a healthy way, you really only see what popular media is putting out. And back then it was a lot of like the movie Boys Don't Cry. And so, you know, who wants to identify as trans when all you're being shown is that trans people are, you know, being killed or being assaulted, or and I mean it's the same with even older films and popular media for lesbians and gays. I remember as a teenager watching this really, really beautiful film about these two young lesbians, and one of them ends up dying by suicide because the identities aren't accepted in the family, and it just sort of, all of those things, I think, sort of contributed to a lot of like what Jay's talking about in terms of, you know, assuming a space is unsafe or people are unsafe until like otherwise proven. And so I also, with my youth services coordinator position, I do a lot of presentations sort of like this, whether it's in schools to students or to staff. I was actually here at Holland College last week doing a presentation on creating more welcoming and inclusive spaces with Holland College staff. And so, yeah, for me as a non-binary person, that's really important because a lot of our spaces are very gendered, or we kind of make a lot of assumptions, and these assumptions happen in a lot of spaces that you wouldn't really assume they would happen. So maybe like working in libraries, you'd be like, well, what do we need to, like, no one's going to come to us and necessarily disclose their identity. What do we need to know about this for? But it's actually, I think, more important from the perspective of just recognizing that there are other identities, so that we're not assuming someone's heterosexual and saying something about like, oh, you know, I'm assuming that you're female, so you must have a male partner, or assuming that people are cisgender and things like that. So I really kind of come at this from more of a perspective of how can we kind of make our language and the ways that we interact with people more inclusive, because I also have a very extensive background in customer service, and a lot of scripts in customer service are very gendered. There's a lot of, oh, thank you, ma'am, thank you, sir, what can I get for you today, ladies, and that kind of. So I think for me, it's also really important to come at it from the perspective of how can we, you know, make our language more inclusive, how can we make our spaces more inclusive, and there's just a lot of different levels. I guess
Rory, can you explain what cisgendered means?
Yes. So cisgender is, so we've said transgender already. So I'm like, where to begin? So basically, cisgender means that your gender identity, so the gender that you feel internally, your internal sense or experience of gender, is in line with the sex that you were assigned at birth. We don't say biological sex or natal sex because ultimately at the end of the day, when you're born, the doctor doesn't know your entire hormonal profile or your entire biological everything. They just see your genitals, make an assumption of whether you're male or female, and then move on from there. So cisgender is when your internal sense of gender, so your gender identity and your sex assigned at birth are in line. So you were assigned male at birth and you identify as a man, you're cisgender. But let's say so for me, I was assigned female at birth, but I identify as non-binary, and so that is not cisgender, so I identify as transgender. That being said, not all non-binary people identify as transgender, and that's sort of just getting, at the end of the day, I will say, like, baseline, I mean, you have this page of terms, which is definitely not exhaustive, and I would just say at baseline, it's really about how that person experiences their own thing. So just really, I think at the bottom of this page, it just says, don't make assumptions. That's kind of my main thing. But yeah, it was a bit of a long-winded way of explaining cisgender. But
no, I think, you know, the terminology is really important because I think people are scared to ask, right? We throw terms around like people, well, librarians, I mean, I do the same thing within student affairs. You know, we have acronyms that are just known to us. So sometimes within the queer community, we throw out acronyms and people they feel like they have to assume that they know what they mean. And I think it's okay to ask those questions if you don't know what something means. But sometimes, again, it's embarrassing, or you've heard it so often. It's kind of like the neighbor that you should know their name because you've been their neighbor for like 10 years and you don't know their name. So now you can't ask what their name is. It's sort of that, right?
I think it's also people being worried about offending people within the community. I think generally speaking, we all want to be really nice and we all mean well. And sometimes it's not asking those questions and making the assumptions that actually does more harm than asking the question in a respectful way. So just, I think for today, for here at least, we're a pretty open group and we're not gonna, please ask all of your stupid questions. But
Yeah. And I think part of the presentation was how do you make libraries more inclusive, right, for the 2S LGBTQ plus community? And, you know, I'm asked that question a lot. All three of us, I think, have done many presentations to many different groups. And that's really the number one question that I'm asked. I don't know about you folks.
Yeah.
And it's really simple. We're not a really, I don't know, high-tech community in terms of what our needs would be. What I hear from most people, whether they're anywhere on the spectrum of in the queer community, is have a flag, have a sticker, have a positive space. I think, Rory, you were saying.
The positive space sign.
The positive space signs.
Yeah, I think the positive space sign has the upside down rainbow triangle, and it just says that this is a space where we're accepting of all identities, regardless of gender and sexual orientation. Something as simple as that can really be an indicator for, you know, when you're entering a space, sort of assuming that it's unsafe, seeing that and being like, oh, okay, I can breathe. And then I think the next step is sort of also just how we interact.
Yeah. Those sorts of things, you know, visual presentations really matter. Like I said, I'm fairly stable in my life. Well, some would argue I'm not, but I consider myself fairly stable. I am 48 years old and I've been out to my family and to my friends for years. I see a rainbow sticker and I still smile. Right? I can't imagine. I still feel like, okay, you at least know something, right? And so, you know, I think it's those sorts of visual identities, the positive space things, the trans flag, the gay flag, the whatever flag, right? I think those things matter. The other thing that really matters, and things are hard to change within institutions. I never knew that before. I always worked nonprofit before where we had two people and the decision was made, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, great, done. Done. In institutions, not so easy sometimes. Now, again, I work at UPEI and I'm so lucky to work there because the red tape really isn't that hard to get through. Although it does take long time to make things happen because we have to make sure that it's for the good of all of our students, which is really the question. The one thing that I hear a lot, other than visual representation, is bathrooms. So I might pass it over. I've never had a problem with bathrooms. I'm cisgendered. But I know for other people within my community, bathrooms is the thing that if you can change one thing other than buying a 50-cent gay pride sticker to put on your computer, this would be the thing to change. So I'll turn it over to, do you guys want to chat about that?
Sure. Yeah.
You're good with the bathroom.
Yeah, totally. Good with bathroom talk. For myself, growing up, bathrooms were probably one of the most dangerous places for me to be. And even it turned out as an adult, which I continue to surprise me, because I often dressed like a boy, and I was gendered female at birth. And so I would go and use the women's bathroom, and that would be where a lot of bullying would take place, where I'd be physically attacked and verbally, emotionally, but as an adult as well, too. And it continued right on until I started transitioning and then started using the men's bathroom. And then it pretty much stopped then. But even as an adult, I've had incidents where a lot of it was just people yelling at me, people coming in, thinking they're in the wrong bathroom and leaving, then coming back in, which is fine, but then getting mad at me was a thing that they would get upset. I've had someone in there with their child, it's just at a restaurant, grab the child and protectively put the child behind them. I've had someone grab me by the scruff of the neck and pull me out of the bathroom, a man who thought I was going into the wrong bathroom. So I had an incident that happened just a couple of years ago at UPEI, and I was there for my niece's graduation. And even though I was 37, 36 at the time, I'm kind of short, and I do sometimes look, especially from behind, like I'm younger than I am. And I'd use the bathroom there, and I guess there was a group of girls that thought that I was a younger student and who surrounded me and started yelling at me in the bathroom until they saw my face, and then they stopped. But it just brought me right back to what it was like in high school. So I was thinking, wow, this stuff is still going on. And for trans individuals, I mean, there's kind of a joke it's not very funny, but that we have really strong bladders because it's safer to just not use public bathroom at all sometimes than to use them. So having gender inclusive bathrooms, having especially single stall bathrooms, there's really no reason why they should be gendered in the first place. And I know even myself, before identifying as trans, if there was a really long lineup for the women's bathroom and not for the men's, I would just go to the men's bathroom, and that usually didn't cause an issue. Now when it's shared bathrooms, that was a different thing. But even with shared bathrooms, having gender inclusive bathrooms is something that wonderfully UPEI has started to adapt in the library as well as on at least in one building. Main building. Yeah.
Every building now.
Oh, every building now?
The single stalled.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, right. But the multi-stalled we only have in Maine and in the library. Right.
Awesome. Yeah. So the multi-stall bathrooms, or at the very least having a single stall bathroom. Sometimes I've seen bathrooms at some restaurants, they have like male, female, public bathrooms, and then they would have one that was like a family bathroom or something like that. And that it's not just trans individuals, non-binary individuals, or even individuals who just dress a way that society deems that to be of a different gender. People that could be made targets because of that, as well as individuals with disabilities who have a helper that goes in the bathroom with them. There's a number of reasons why having these kind of bathrooms would be inclusive of many people, not just the trans community. So it's definitely a big issue, and something that, unless it's something you've had to experience, we often just take for granted that we could just go to the bathroom when we need to and use it and not have to worry about being attacked or being yelled at. And the thing with myself, like as I said, growing up with believing that there was something really wrong with me, is that I believed that I was in the wrong. So if I was in the bathroom and someone came up to me and got mad at me, I would apologize and feel horrible that I had upset them, instead of thinking like, no, I actually deserve to be in this bathroom like anyone else. But because I had been internalized that transphobia right from such a young age, I still struggle with when it happens, and it has happened in the bathroom. I still struggle with standing up for myself because there's still a part of me that feels like I don't deserve to be there. And unfortunately, that's something, I don't know if it'll ever truly go away, but my hope is that by creating these spaces is that so kids can grow up being included and not having those kind of experiences I had, so that they can live their lives without that kind of discrimination.
Right.
That's so, I don't know if I can follow that. I think for me, I have been very fortunate in my past that
I have just kind of, I haven't actually experienced any like harassment or anything to the level that Jay's talking about in washrooms or bathrooms, but I do, as a non-binary person, I definitely like have that moment where, you kind of stop in front of the bathrooms and you're like, okay, which one do I go into? Like, okay, I have to go to the bathroom. So which one? And so going to the bathroom for me has become this very put your head down, get in, wash your hands, get out sort of experience. And I have been fairly fortunate that no one's really questioned that. I mean, I've gotten some weird looks, but again, head down and get the hell out really quick is kind of how I approach the washroom situation. But I mean, I think for me, I was around when the multi-stall all gender washrooms went in at UPEI, and that was just, it was almost like I didn't even realize what a relief it would be to have that, especially, you go into these situations always like anxious, and then when you finally kind of don't have to be, it's like, oh, okay, this is actually really nice. And I mean, it's a pretty simple change. Everybody has to go to the washroom. Like, everybody needs to use the washroom. And so it's, like Jay was saying, for multiple reasons, it's important to have all gender washrooms. I mean, I think one of the best examples is like parents who have children that are a different gender from them and need to accompany their children to the washroom. And maybe there isn't a family, like a single stall family washroom in certain places. And so I think it's good that we are sort of just generally, at least in Canadian society, I feel like we are moving towards embracing the all-inclusive, gender-inclusive washroom. But yeah, I don't think that going to the washroom should have to be a stressful experience for anyone. So, yeah.
Does anyone remember Ally McBeal?
Yes.
Right? Like, that was in the like early 90s or something, right? They had all gendered multi-stalled washrooms, and they were a law firm, right? So at UPEI, what we've done is we started with single stalled washrooms, right? So what we mean by single stalled is the bathrooms that you go in and shut the door and lock the door. So it's only one toilet, you and the sink, because they were male, female, right? And so we started with changing all of those on campus to all gender. And actually, there was a reaction to that, unbelievably so, in some of the areas. And so we had to do a lot of education with our staff and faculty and students. And it was, it was around tampons, actually. And that in the female washrooms, there were tampons. And they didn't want their male counterparts to know that they had their period. Right, and this is common in Canadian world, right? We don't talk about women having periods. We're 54% of the population, and apparently we don't have periods, right? So we're still brown bagging the tampons, the choppers, and those sorts of things. So, I can understand when people are really stressed about these sorts of things, and it's always been this way. And then, introducing the multi-stalled washrooms, and that was. Luckily we have an administration at UPEI that's for this, right? They just did it, basically. It just landed on somebody's desk and they're like, yeah, we're going to do this. And it happened at the library for multiple reasons. One, the library is really the hub of the campus, right? It's physically at UPEI, it's in the middle of our campus, but it's also open the latest. Right, all students go there, right? It's the hub of the place. Some would argue it's not, but I would argue it is. And they didn't have any single-stalled washrooms, right? So how are we going to be inclusive of all of our students and all of our people if we can't be inclusive at the library? So we changed there's 2 floors in our library. And one of the main floor is both washrooms are all gendered. So both, they multi-stalled, all gendered. You go in now. I always go to the left because I graduated my first degree from UPEI, and that was the girls' bathroom, and I just continue to go there. But both of them are all gendered, right? And then the floor above us, on the second floor, they're gendered. So there's multi-stalled gendered washrooms for those people that just can't make that leap, right? And it's worked really well. The feedback has been phenomenal. Everybody really, I've not heard any negative feedback. I don't know, and so again, it's just that education component, which is really the most important, because I agree with what Jay and Rory said. People don't want to be mean, right? It's not really about being mean. It's just, they don't understand. So as soon as people understand, like you hear these stories and it's done, right? We change the washrooms because that's horrible, right? To have to wonder if you're going to be abused when you go pee. It's just not something that I thought about as a cisgendered woman, right? So, the takeaway would be that would be a great influence on how to make things inclusive. And, even when we were going through the process of making all gendered washrooms, it was good for the community, for the queer community. People were saying, well, at least we're trying. Right? At least you're talking about it. You know about it. You know it's an issue, even if you're not there yet. But you will get there, right? Again, changing the single stall bathrooms to all gendered is easy. It's a sign, right? So you put the sign up and carry on. So those would be things that, would be really kind of two takeaways. The other thing that we've done, and sorry, I'm looking at my phone, but my colleague sent it to me because I forgot to print them off. But one of the things that we put now on our administration, when you come into the department, you first meet our administrative assistant, right? On the back of her computer, but the front where students would see it, we've put a sign that just says, again, I don't know if I can even see it because anyway, but it's basically, yeah, I kind of do. It's basically, we don't care about your pronoun. Like, it's not quite that, but it says, see, glasses on, glasses off. But it's basically a sign that says, my pronoun is a big deal to me. Using it doesn't need to be a big deal for you. So we have those posters set around. But then on the back of her computer, it just says, I'll use your pronoun that you want, no big deal, right? So again, it's just that visual cue that, if I came in and used the pronoun of he, that that the person greeting you is not going to question that, right? We have lots of people, I have lots of people in my community, we have lots of students, we have lots of people that use libraries that may not, quote unquote, pass as the gender that they are yet, right? So they may be going through transitioning. You folks may be the first person that they ever use their other pronoun with, right? So if I was going to transition to be male, you might be the first people that I say my pronoun is he, right? So again, using the pronouns that the people themselves deem as appropriate. So whether it's he or whether it's they or them or she, I think is really important. And again, those visual cues. So on the back of all our computers, we have those signs, right? Yeah.
So Cynthia from CAUL. My question, I guess, is if you're at the service desk and you don't get introduced to that person, or like they don't volunteer, how do you have that conversation if you're used to saying the thing, thank you ma'am, thank you sir, or things of that nature? How do you get to that pronoun?
I mean, often we never use a pronoun.
Right.
Yeah. Like I might admit, like we would never say to book an appointment with a counselor, you need your pronoun, right? Like we don't use pronouns often, and we're out of the habit. I mean, I think again, it's training and conversations in terms of don't say thank you, ma'am. I think it's just conversation in a staff meeting, essentially, right? But the pronoun thing, we actually never use pronouns. We try not to use forms of pronouns and those sorts of things. It's literally the idea that there's different pronouns, right?
I'm sorry. No, and I was also just going to say, I mean, I agree with Treena. It is getting out of the habit of tacking on a ma'am or a sir onto your thank you and just kind of being like, thank you, period. And because I do think like we only really use pronouns when we're talking about someone who's not there, or if we're talking about someone who is there, but in like, oh yeah, I know Jay, he's great. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be talking to Jay and be like, hello, he. Like, I mean, it's not really how that would go. And so I think it really is, especially if it's just these sort of cordial interactions where you don't really know a person really very well. It is just sort of getting out of that habit of tacking any sort of gendered indicator onto it. And then, I mean, when it came down to actually finding out the pronoun, like you would have to have a conversation and just sort of be like, oh, okay, what pronoun do you use? And I always tell people that the best way to go about finding out someone else's pronouns would be to declare your own first, and then that also opens the door for other folks to declare their pronouns. And now I don't know, so let's say for instance, if in your library you all wear name tags or something like that, it's as simple as tacking your pronouns onto the name tag as well, and that's an indicator to folks that first, you know what pronouns are, and second, that you recognize that there are more pronouns than he and she. And so that's, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So part of the other, conversation that the three of us had last week when we were talked about this presentation was we came up with some questions actually, because we know, again, libraries are does everybody here work at a university library? Or college? Okay, so there's no community librarians. Okay. So we all work within systems then, right? So, part of the thing that we kind of thought about was questions that may trigger some thoughts. The other thing is the two handouts that I handed out at the beginning. One is the gender unicorn, which, first of all, who doesn't love a unicorn? Not many people. And they live with rainbows, right? Yeah. So it's like a perfect mixture. And I might get Rory or Jay to kind of go through this, but the other is a list of kind of definitions. Again, the second biggest questions I get asked is, can you give me a list of definitions, right? And really there isn't one because they're ever changing. But this is a shorter list from Peers Alliance that is kind of the most up-to-date that we can find.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it sort of covers everything that's in the 2S LGBTQ plus acronym, but then also, I have to work on the spacing of that. That's, but yeah, and then there's also some other things sort of on the back, but it's just important to know, and I think it does say actually in the glossary of terms that the list is nowhere near exhaustive. And I mean, new identity labels are being created all the time, especially as younger folks are feeling more free to identify themselves more broadly. And so I think that the main point is not that you necessarily need to know the definition of everything, but it's good to kind of just have an overview so that when someone does, or if someone does sort of disclose a certain identity, whether you know it exactly or not, you can sort of have that sort of just base of knowledge to work from, and just kind of be like, oh, okay, that's great that you identify that way. I've heard of that, but what does that mean for you, and that sort of thing, if that were to ever come up. Mm-hmm. You never know.
Mm-hmm. So we have about a half an hour left in terms of the way that this presentation is going. But I don't know if people have some questions or if you'd like us to kind of have some thought-provoking questions. What?
I'm just looking at the,
okay.
No, I'm good.
Yeah.
I just have one question. So in terms of the libraries and synergies with the LGBTQ, I'm trying to remember all the acronyms.
I can't remember. Sorry. I say queer community.
Yeah. So where do you see the synergies between the library? We talked about safer spaces, pronouns, but where do you see us working together on projects or things that might come up? I have no idea. We had an earlier discussion about creating an archive for LGBTQ materials.
Yes.
But where do you see other synergies between the library and the communities?
Yeah.
Well, you go. No, I'm just thinking of the Confed Center and peers and events and stuff.
Yeah,
but,
totally. Yeah.
You go. Okay. I mean, for me, the Confed Center library here has been really, really great. They help host. So Peers Alliance every year now for the past 4 years during Pride Week has hosted Outspoken, which is a poetry slam event. And then the library has also been really, really great. So for Pride Week, they actually made up like a 2S LGBTQ+ book display so that folks actually knew that there was material in the library. And so I think there's just a lot of opportunity for libraries to have that information, especially with what Treena was saying, and just for libraries to potentially host events, especially on campus. So if there are like GSAs on the campuses wherever you work, the libraries and the GSAs could potentially work together to like put on different inclusive events and things like that. That's just where I'm thinking. You go.
Oh. No, absolutely. I think that's great. And what the Confederation Library has done as well with the drag queen
the
reading
story time.
times,
Yeah,
the story time, I think is a wonderful event. But also in terms of material, like having an archive, having sections is really wonderful. But I think it's also important that 2S LGBTQ material be dispensed throughout the library. So it isn't just considered its own kind of special corner, that it be disseminated so that it is included in kind of normal, so in sections that have to do with different kinds of disciplines and different kind of, like say family or sports or medicine or anything like that, making sure that there's LGBTQ stuff that's disseminated throughout that so that it is very much a normalizing kind of a thing, and definitely having yeah, and not just during Pride, but just having
exactly,
like year-round, having inclusive events and having like speakers, or they could have even teaming up with the arts community or theater productions. Like there's so many different really great activities, and by having these kind of associations, that definitely tells to us LGBTQ students that okay, this library is pretty affirming. It's not just doesn't just have a rainbow sticker there. It's actually kind of. It's one thing to have the sticker, but unless there's action that kind of follows that, then the sticker is kind of misleading. So it's important, and that happens unfortunately. And then people get kind of frustrated and don't really trust it as much. But so it's really important that action kind of be behind that, and things like I know we mentioned pronouns, but making sure that people's names are proper names are used as well, and that's more of a systemic thing, I guess, because you're part of a university. But individuals ensuring that because for many individuals, they're not able to, their legal name may not be their actual name that they've chosen for a number of reasons, and so it's important that we address people by, because we not use pronouns very often, but we would use names more often, that they be proper names as well. Yeah.
And I think being purposeful, right? So on campuses, we have lots of student groups, right? So being purposeful and reaching out to those student groups, I think is really important. Finding somebody on campus that, supports and advocates for these different groups of marginalized students, I think is really important. But I think the being purposeful is important. The systemic problems that we have with gender are real. So what Jay was saying in terms of the legal name versus the preferred name continues to be, although we have a really good system, but if I'm out sick one day, right, like we have a system in place that people can change their legal names to a preferred name. That is really important because the name at a university shows up on everything. Class lists, right? So if I'm sitting in a class looking like I look, and my name and the teacher's calling out Tim Smith. Tim, are you here? And I have to put my hand up to say I'm here, right? That is jarring for a student. So making sure that the system works for the student is of utmost paramount. And often libraries and librarians are the social justice advocates on some campuses, right? So, or colleges as well. So making sure that those systems are in place is really important, because again, it goes back to training. We've had that system, the using preferred name in our system for a long time at UPEI. Luckily, again, our administration has been very supportive of these changes. But we can't change the legal name, right? So the legal name needs to stay the legal name or student loans get sent back, right? So there has to be a system in place at any institution where they have the preferred name and the legal name, so that the legal name continues to stay in the system, but the preferred name shows up on things like class lists, Moodle, which is our educational platform, emails, right?
Student cards.
The student cards, right? So things that are non-official, but the accounting piece still needs to stay the same, because Tim Smith has not officially changed her legal name to Treena. And so Tim Smith's student loan gets sent back if Tim Smith's legal name does not stay in the system. So again, people are really wanting to help. So a transgendered student comes into, you know, an office and, oh my God, yes, of course I'll change your name, right? So happy to be able to help that student. But again, changing the legal name is not much help. So having those sorts of systems is really important, and understanding your campus is really important in how those systems work, because it is life-changing for a student to have their preferred name called out in class.
It can also be a safety issue as well,
Yes.
too. There's a similar thing that we're dealing with now in the healthcare system on the island, is trying to make it so that people's preferred names are prioritized. So when you go to the QH, for example, to access services, you go through admitting, and they have a form there, and they have preferred name, but the preferred name is often skipped over. It's something that's not prioritized. Their person's legal name is prioritized. Similar to the school, it's important that a person's legal name be on their medical records. It's a safety issue that it needs to be there. But when it comes to preferred name, what we're changing now, which is wonderful, is that we're making that preferred field mandatory. So a similar thing could happen in a university. Preferred name shouldn't be something that just kind of glazed over. It needs to be the prioritized name for everything except for where it's absolutely essential, such as student loans, accounting, such as when it comes to prescribing medication, things like that. But when it comes to everything else, the preferred name needs to be prioritized. And it wasn't a big thing to do in the system because they already had the field there. The problem was that it wasn't being prioritized or made mandatory. So something like that, that's kind of simple, can make a big difference. I noticed now too, when you go and get blood done at the hospital, which is wonderful, instead of them calling out your name, they call it a number. So everyone's a number now. So that's a way for things like healthcare for it to become. So it's not, sometimes it could seem like it's this big thing. We have to upend everything and redo everything. And it seems like a really big task. But oftentimes there are things like this where it can be simplified and that other places have done. And we just have to look at where it's been done in other institutions and other provinces and follow suit. And that's what's happening in healthcare. So I believe a similar thing could happen with universities and colleges as well.
Yeah.
Cynthia?
Yes?
It's Michelle calling from Dalhousie. Is this coming across okay? Or is it
Oh, yeah, it's perfect.
clear? Okay. I do have a question that is kind of connected to pronouns, but it's more related to the French language that some of our campuses use as their official languages in the CAUL system. And the fact that in the French language there are feminine and masculine adjectives, for example. So if you're working with a patron, whether a student or faculty member, a person might say prête or contente or heureuse instead of heureux, content, or prêt. How is that dealt with?
Anyone? Anyone? We have, you know, it's funny. Je parle français, but un peu. That's about it. Bonjour and au revoir. So, you know, it's funny. I have had conversations around these sorts of things, and I don't know if there's an answer.
I also don't know if there's an answer. I know that there are many conversations happening within the community about pronouns in French. So my knowledge is kind of limited to Reddit. So
high source of research.
Well, and I mean, really, it is right now about the gender neutral or gender nonconforming communities that speak French right now, who are trying to sort of push for diverse pronoun use within the French language. Although I will admit, my knowledge is incredibly limited in that way. But I would say that, I mean, ultimately, I think if we're giving the opportunity for folks to identify their pronouns however they wish, that maybe that is a good way. And then I think if we're talking about sort of like groups of people and saying like either boys and girls or ladies and gentlemen, I imagine in French there is also potentially just sort of a general no. It's always right, because doesn't it just default to male?
Yeah.
With a group, right?
Yeah.
Well, we could talk about the sexism embedded in that. It's all male, right?
Yeah.
Right. That has its own inherent
Again,
issues.
I think what I would default back to actually is just to even acknowledge that is really important, right? So the internet caller, I forget your name, I'm sorry. Michelle.
From Dalhousie.
From Dalhousie. I think even acknowledging that that's an issue and naming it and claiming it will give the queer community a sense that, oh, okay, yeah, you know this is happening. And, you know, eventually it will, I mean, changing a language probably isn't as easy as a sign on the bathroom, I'm assuming. But, you know, that will give people the space to know that you're thinking about it and that you know that this is an issue. I know that's not really a great answer, but I think that is what I would do. We're not a bilingual institution where I work, although we have had these conversations. So I think just the acknowledgement that it's an issue is really important.
Yeah. And having the same kind of, sorry.
I think she was just
I was going to say having the same kind of signs that ask the person for their preferred pronoun in French as well too, what they would prefer to go by. They only have 2 to choose from, which is unfortunate, but even that much might help some people.
Does that matter?
No, I'm telling you, some of them are making up new ones.
That's great.
Check Reddit.
That's great. Yeah. But yeah, putting it on the person to say, please tell us your preferred pronouns and then going from there. Yeah.
So, sort of slightly related to it, if we wanted to learn more about these conversations that are occurring, where do you suggest are the best or the optimal places for us to start looking for these conversations so that we can engage in those conversations?
Not Reddit.
You know, like if we're all working on university and college campuses, there's somebody on your campus. There's a person. Find that person or find those people.
Find your gender studies department or whatever,
right?
Or diversity and social justice department.
Right.
Yeah.
And start having those conversations. Put a call out to students. I mean, it can be as simple as offering free pizza and saying, we're going to talk about whatever, gender, LGBT2S community. We want your input for the library. Free pizza for, right? I mean, it can be getting our students input on things, you know, because we're all individual campuses and we all have our own culture, is really important. You know, people, you know, I happen to work on a university campus that there's a number of us that have positions that are perceived as, you know, long-term kind of positions. And, you know, I have a couple of faculty on my campus that are very vocal and very, you know, kind of pushing things forward. Again, our librarians are awesome. So, you know, find those people and have those conversations. If you don't have the people, be the person and put a call out to your student union and say, here's what we're wanting to do. We want to be we want to be inclusive. We want to help. And what do we need to do?
And also just like different places you could look online, like there's EGAL is an organization that does a lot. I mean, even
hosted in Halifax. I think the office is.
Is it Halifax?
Halifax or
Okay.
Toronto, maybe?
I
It
think
may be
probably Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions? Any other questions?
Great.
One of the things we asked, we were wondering, and I didn't realize that it was all university and college librarians, I guess, from the title of the association. But I thought for some reason there were some community. But one of the things, you know, I can remember, I think as a kid, again, I used the library a lot when I was a child. But I think we used to have gendered like children's sections, but you guys might not have children. We don't have a children's section at UPI, so I'm assuming you don't yet either. But you know, in my day, there was the boys section and the girls section, right? I think I can remember that, but that was, do you remember that? Yeah, So, yeah, and I think, you know, at the Convent Center, it was upstairs and it was glorious. It was like my favorite place to be, but again, I think it was gendered. So getting out of those gendered roles, I think, and it comes up in things that, even in policies, right? Like when we're creating policies, I try to create policies and not use he and she and use them, right? Because I think that's more inclusive of all people, right? So it's just thinking about those sorts of things.
I think it's also important to think about like the types of materials that are available in your library, just because I also remember like being at UPEI. I graduated this past May, but I definitely remember sort of looking for different like queer resources for writing different papers and different things, and it was actually kind of staggering how limited the selection was at UPEI, or just that maybe all of the books that they had around queer theory or things that were all very old, or just that like I knew that there were more up-to-date versions of things, but it was like I could almost only get them either as an ebook or through like an interlibrary loan, because some other library that was bigger and thought about that more had the book, and we didn't. And so that's something that I know one of the faculty members in the diversity and social justice department has kind of also been talking with the library about getting more like current materials and sort of newer things, because I mean, things are being written all the time. There's a lot more research out there. And I think it is, and again, I don't know how the systems work in terms of libraries getting different materials and things like that, but I think it is really important that you're able to access that information at your library and not necessarily have to wait for an interlibrary loan or, yeah, those were some of the issues that I kind of ran into in terms of getting more educational materials around like queer theory or even just like trans history or things like that. And yeah.
And I think we have to be aware as well that, you know, when we say we're going to archive our history, we talk about this within the gay community, gay, queer, whatever word I'm using of the minute. And, you know, I have to, even myself, I mean, you know, things have changed rapidly within the last 5 years and stayed the same rapidly. So there's a lot of my community that still isn't out. A lot. I know a lot, like, you know, a staggering number of people in professionalized, you know, jobs that will not come out. They simply, you know, I worked for many years in another province, and I was never out as a counselor because I was never really, I worked with youth, and the you know, it just wasn't safe. It wasn't good. I would predict it probably still isn't. You know, so we have to be, you know, careful. You know, within the gay community, I mean, it's kind of known that you don't out people. Still, right? You know, a lot of my colleagues that are my age or older, they might not be out, even though they work at a university, right? So we have to be really careful, and we have to be cognizant that not everybody's comfortable doing this, right? And, you know, when we talk about, I know we've been talking as a community of PEI about archiving, right? The kind of gay history. And luckily we have a couple of people within the community that have a large, long history on PEI. And, you know, getting them to write it down and do these sorts of things, I think is really important, right? But there are still a lot of people that, why would I? Right? I mean, you know, we all have lots and lots of stories to tell about discrimination. I was fired from a job for being gay. Again, not in 1962, right? Like, I'm only 48, so, you know, do the math. So I think it's really important that we're gentle with people, that we don't put it on the backs of people that are out, because people get tired. And, you know, if they're fighting for something for so long and then it just becomes, you know, why would we? So I think, you know, being gentle, I always joke, you know, with anything, just don't be an arsehole, right? Like, be nice, be kind, be gentle, because that's still, you know, very much an issue. And although, you know, we sit up here and say, you know, and we were all kind of talking about this, and maybe you guys can chat, we only have a couple of minutes, but, you know, we all sit up here and we're like, yeah, we should be doing this, and we're like loud and boisterous. But, you know, at the end of the day, I still don't like to come out. Right? Like, I sit on, you know, this is interesting. I sit on a couple of different boards, and I thought I was out to people. And, you know, they asked me who my husband was. Right? And I don't like to come out because it becomes then about me. Oh, the gays, right? And then we have to know all about, when did you come out, when did you, like, I just want to have a drink. It's like after the board meeting, I just have a drink with the rest of you, right? So I didn't mention it, I didn't address, I didn't answer the question, I didn't, right? So, you know, we all do that. We all, it's almost like an embarrassment that if I say, oh, remember that I'm gay, then all of a sudden, all of the attention becomes on me again. And, you know, so I just don't answer the question. I avoid the question and I don't answer it. So yeah, we can sit up here and be all of this is what we need to do, and rah policies, but at the end of the day, I'm still a person, and it still affects me every day. I still don't like to come out. If you guys want to, same things, right?
Well,
Similar things.
For myself, issues happen when someone sees me who hasn't seen me for a long time. It could be like a relative or a friend from school or a friend of the family's or something like that. Sometimes I'll just completely avoid someone and hope they don't see me, because I don't want to deal with the changes that have happened. Sometimes the experience is just a little, they don't really say anything. They just kind of go on like nothing has happened. Other times I have them, despite how I look, still gender me as female, and which is strange. But it's always a choice that I have to make to engage with someone, and how much I'm going to talk about it. And just sometimes it's just more of like, yeah, you know, I've changed a little since last time we've seen, and kind of in a joking way get into it. And some people are people that I have an idea might be more accepting than other people, where I have an idea probably won't be as accepting. So yeah, it's stressful. It's something I'd rather not have to do, but it's reality, and yeah, definitely there are times where I will, even though it's someone that otherwise I probably would have liked to speak with and be like, oh hi, how are you doing? And it's nice to kind of reconnect, but I'm just like, I'm not feeling like this today. It's just too much. So yeah, you do have to take those choices, and it's always hard. And sometimes the reaction is wonderful and people are great, and it's great, but it's still stressful. I guess it's never not stressful. And it's a choice that, yeah, we have to keep making, I guess.